Happy Saturday, everyone. Welcome to Sustainabuzz. I am your host for tonight's show. At Sustainabuzz, we guest individuals, leaders, and advocates who champion the causes of global sustainability. Last week, my co-host Marks had the chance to talk to Miss Joy Munsaya Kakal of Coca-Cola, who shared with us her advocacy and Coke's strategy for a world without waste. Today, let's talk about the buzz behind green architecture. Our guest is the managing partner at APEC Architects. He is a founding member of the Green Architecture Advocacy Philippines, where he served as chairman from 2011 to 2019. A longtime advocate of sustainable architecture, you could say that he's an influencer in the adoption of green designs in the country and in Asia. Now, we have a chance to talk to him about the relevance of green architecture at the time of COVID. And after COVID, will green buildings matter for a green recovery? So let's all welcome architect Mike Guerrero.
Hi, hello guys. Good evening.
Yes, good evening,
Let's hope that
architect
we
Mike.
have. Let's look forward to a very enriching and enlightening session today.
Right, good evening. Thank you for joining us. Let's go straight to the point, architect Mike. In a
Mhm.
nutshell, what does green architecture really mean?
Okay, well, before that, I'd like to thank you guys for inviting me here, because green architecture is actually a component of sustainability. Sustainability is the big picture, and green architecture is that small component of sustainability. No, now the best way probably to understand green architecture is looking back at the world. The world, I'm not a scientist, but I just checked this out in Google. The world was around for about 4.6 billion years. Okay, so the Earth was moving, and nature in the world was perfectly sustainable. Okay, there were through cycles, seasons, etc. And then sometime 200 years ago, 200,000 years ago, man appeared into the picture, and man started creating their shelters. How did they do it? They used the materials around them, they used the resources around them, and they created their s- shelters in such a way that it was attuned to the climate, so that in spite of the heat, the cold, the rain, etc., man was comfortable inside their shelters. That is green architecture in a nutshell. Okay, now, however, at some point, because of industrial revolution, we sort of veered away from that concept of just designing our shelters with nature. So I define green architecture as designing with nature. It's the shortest definition you can define in the world about green architecture, because if you look around, you probably find so many millions of ways of describing green architecture. You talk about energy, etc. But I think the core of green architecture is simply designing with nature. It is from nature that we draw our resources. It is nature where we plan the environment and build the shelters according to that environment. And even now, today, it is from nature that we draw inspiration. That's why there's such things called biomimicry. No? So in a nutshell, that is it. No, designing with nature. That is green architecture.
Right, designing with nature. That's a really good definition of green architecture. It's the first time I heard about that definition. But siguro, for our audience, no, in concrete terms, no, how do you actually design with nature? You mentioned biomimicry, the things that we draw from natural resources and all. But what
Yes.
are some examples of designing with nature as green architecture?
Okay. So design with nature. The first thing you have to do is analyze the place where you're going to build, which is a specific environment, a specific climate, the temperature, know where the sun is, rises in the east, sets on the west, what is the wind, what are the resources available to you, water, and then what materials are available in your area. Then you build accordingly. So those are the very, very practical ways of design with nature. We have to tune our building to the location we are building in. So a very
Mm-hmm.
practical example. In the Philippines, it's so hot, right? So, and the hottest time of the day is in the afternoon, and the sun is on the west. So if you were going to design just for that particular consideration, then you would design to put maybe less windows or even no windows on the west so that the sun
Mm-hmm.
doesn't come into your building and hit the inside. No? So that's just one of the many possibilities you can do for designing with nature.
Right. So thank you for that. No, it's really parang growing with the flow of nature when it comes to thinking about your designs. Tama ba ang
Mhm.
pagkakaintindi ko, Architect Mike? So
Yes, yes,
with that,
yes.
no, bakit siya nag-arise yung idea of green architectures? You said na there came industrial revolution, there came advancement in ano, parang now before human civilizations built attuning to nature. But what do you think happened after na it broke this natural tendency for us to build in accordance with nature?
Well, it is the invention of standardizations. It was the invention of transportation around the world to come to where you are and
Mm-hmm.
build it. So, for example, those things, those materials sometimes are not fit for the particular condition you're in. I'll give you one example.
Right.
Let's look at our roofing systems. The roof. What do we have in the
Mm-hmm.
Philippines? What's the predominant roofing system in the Philippines? GI sheet, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know that that is the hottest type of roof? And we are in a tropical country. Just think about it. What are our neighbors using for the roof? Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia. They use clay tiles. And where did they get the clay tiles from? Their backyard. We had clay tiles before when the Spaniards were here. See, so that's what I mean. We just look at, oh, this there's this material here. We don't think that it comes from another country, maybe the concept, and then it doesn't fit our climate. No, so that's just one example.
Right.
So the globalization has its downfalls also. It has its pitfalls in terms of technology transfers, which do not work for the country. That's why when you talk about technology, use this filter: appropriate technology. Every time you see a material being sold to you, think, where was this material made? In what condition was it supposed to be used? And will it work for our country? So that's the simplest
Mm-hmm.
way.
Right, that's true. No, so those are some factors that affected like how we really adopted green designs. But I'm curious, like how did your advocacy on green architecture start? I know you're a pioneer of green architecture here in the Philippines, but where did it come from?
Long, long time ago, I was a nature tripper. I was a backpacker. Way before they had these dome tents, we did the old type. The time we could actually bring your hunting knife out in public. Nobody really bothers about it. So I love nature. I backpack all over the Philippines and many places. And then I took architecture. You see, when you go camping, you analyze the situation. Whenever you go to camp, you analyze the place where you're going to put your tent, where's the slope, what's the best place, etc., etc. No, so when I went to architecture, I realized that well, we are building in nature, and therefore we have to be sensitive to that. So that's where it started, and then of course I graduated architecture, and at first, my advocacy was circled around the official organization of architects in the Philippines, the United Architects of the Philippines. We had a committee there, which is called Green Architecture Committee. But then, as we were there, we realized that green architecture involved more people. So therefore, we spun off and decided to put up a independent advocacy group called Green Architecture Advocacy Philippines, which means that's open to everybody. It's not a professional association, so anybody can join. And we actually started that group in 2011, I think. I'm poor with years. Uh, and then we started doing monthly lectures open to the public. Every single month, we gave lectures open to the public. Myself, I went to different schools, different places to give that lecture. And the main message which we had in that advocacy group, that sustainability must be for all, not for select people, not for those who can afford, but it should be for everyone. And that's why I decided to bring all those concepts of green architecture and sustainability to the very practical and pragmatic level.
Right. Thank you for that pointing that out. Kasi I think I don't know if for many or for some, right? They see green architecture or green building as something expensive. Like, is that true? Is that false? And
Yes,
is
it
this
is.
like a barrier to? Yes, go ahead.
Yes, it is true, and it is a barrier. Why? Why? Because what people see is the external appearances of green. For example,
Mhm.
solar panels, expensive heat reducing glass, etc. So they see that, and of course they equate it to expensive. But there are more basic ways of going green, which I call practical green. And practical green is the foundation of sustainability. Like for example, orientation of the building, putting a lot of windows on the north and south because you get natural light without the heat. Okay, then insulating your roof because it's the part which gets hit by the sun the whole time, and then cross ventilation. So all of these are all very very basic, but then people don't see it, and therefore they do not equate those simple pragmatic practical green strategies to green buildings.
Right. So when you see sometimes the idea of green buildings is just the solar panels, the expensive investments that we do when there are
Yes.
practical ones na won't really cost too much. Tama ba? So
Yes, correct,
apart
correct.
from that, what do you think are looking forward, no? What are barriers? What are other barriers to adopting green practices in building designs?
I analyzed that for a long time, no? And I thought that we have basically we. I'm not talking in. I'm talking about the whole world. We have a problem of communication with respect
Mm-hmm.
to the issue of sustainability. For example, the United Nations have come up with so many meetings every year. They set targets of how to lower your greenhouse gases. Even there's the Sustainable Development Goals, etc., etc. They talk about greenhouse gases, they talk about carbon footprint, etc. But this is just one test. Pull out a guy in the street and ask him, pare, ano ba yung carbon footprint mo? He's going to look at you and, ano, ano? Okay, there's a problem of communication. I actually started advocacy like that, talking about climate change, etc. But I've changed 160 degrees, 180 degrees about that. Now, I just tell them that we have to talk about practical consequences of going green. And then the practical consequences is going to save them money, keep them healthier. And that's what I talk about now. I don't talk anymore about climate change. I don't talk about all of these complex things because it will not work. They do not understand it. So if you want people to buy into a product, right, they have to understand what it is all about. And if you don't understand it, they will not buy into it. So that's the first one. The problem is communication. Second is I call the three C's. Letter C, challenges of going green. First is cost, like we mentioned earlier. The resistance to going green is because people perceive that it is expensive. But however, it is because they see the technological aspects of green. They don't see the pragmatic, passive aspects of green. Second, the complexity. They think it's complex because they see so many gadgets there. Not only that, they see that there are green building rating systems and there are architects who specialize in green, so they think, wow, it's like a different level. No? It's a higher level. No? So people don't want to get into it, and they think, oh, it's too complicated. I'm just going to do a simple house. And then the third C is change, resistance to change. Some people will say, well, we've been doing this for years, no? Why should we change the way we're doing things? So I feel, in my experience and long experience in trying to push green architecture, these are the three common problems which I encounter: the challenge of cost, the challenge of complexity, and the challenge of people not wanting to change.
Right. So these are barriers na I think you could connect to the communication part as well. Na there's a
Yes.
perceived cost attached to going green. They feel it's complex, and then they are kind of resistant to change. You know? So
Yes.
cost, complexity, and change. That's really a good way to summarize the challenges. So on the flip side, what do you think will help drive greater adoption of green practices here in the Philippines?
The way to drive green architect practices in the Philippines is, first, I believe it has to be a bottom-up approach. What
Mm-hmm.
the UN is doing is, and all of these laws, there's even a green building code in the Philippines.
Yeah.
They're all top down, no? Guess what? Do you know that our own Philippine green building code, it only applies to buildings of 10,000 square meters and above. So you can see already that the mentality of that code, no? It's only for the big buildings. So already right away you see people, I'm just doing a house. But think about this. There are much, much, much more small and medium scale projects than big projects. And I think that we should focus on more of that. So has to be a bottom up approach. In other words, if we are able to get individuals to make every single house sustainable, then we are starting a revolution from below, which will go up. Because people who have a sustainable house, they will understand that, uy, mas mura pala yung kuryente ko every month dahil green sa kapitbahay ko. So they talk. Then the kapitbahay thinks, uy, nga pala, ano ba ginawa mo? Ito yung ginawa ko. So, that starts a chain reaction. And that chain reaction is a chain reaction of sold people to the concept. It's not like
Mm-hmm.
forced down upon them. No? So I think that's one way of doing that. That's why I talk to a lot of architects telling them, make sure that every single house you do, even if the owner doesn't ask for it, should be sustainable. Diba? So I think that's the way. It has to be. I think the solution here is bottom up approach so that people start experiencing it, and then they themselves will be the ones to quote unquote market the whole concept.
Right. Right. That's true, Architect Mike. So, actually, okay yun, a bottom-up approach instead of just the top-down. So, kasi nga naman sila na yung advocate for the sustainable housing. And meron agad barrier when it comes to the green building code. It's limited only to the large scale projects, where in fact we have so many small to medium scale projects. Right. So now moving to our situation right now, COVID-19. Do you
Mhm.
think green architecture can contribute to the fight against COVID? Why or why not?
Yes, green architecture will definitely contribute to the fight against COVID because one of the components of a green building is the healthy angle, the healthy
Mm-hmm.
component of a green building. Matter of fact, the green building rating systems call it IEQ, Indoor Environmental Quality, the quality of the environment which you create inside your structure. No, and you know that the best defense for COVID is actually a healthy person. A healthy person who has good resistance can actually manage. Even if you do get COVID, if you're very healthy, it will just be a
Mm-hmm.
mild COVID. No? So if you are able to create a healthy environment, then you're actually making people more resistant to COVID. So what does this indoor environmental quality uh, consist of? First of all, you actually try to create a comfortable environment inside in regard to temperature, no? So it has to be cross ventilated, it has to be cool. Many of you now have been spending your time inside your house for the last magiging almost 1 year na yata tayo eh. March yata yung COVID, no? And then inside the house, you realize that you have to connect with the outside, no? You have to connect with nature because if not, babaling ka, no? You're looking at your four walls. So part of that indoor environment quality is the connecting with the outside so that natural light comes in. There's such a thing called circadian cycle. Circadian cycle tells you your it's like your body clock. No? It tells you when it's time to sleep, when it's time to wake up, etc. And it's normally connected to sunrise and daylight, day and night. No, so it's very important to connect that so that at least you get a good night's sleep, and it helps you with respect to your health. No, a lot of fresh air, and then of course now part of a green building is to have food within your area. So okay, so I know that there's a lot of plantitos and plantitas now, but I hope instead of planting ornamental flowers and plants, let's say, I hope they start planting something edible, because then that becomes a real sustainable approach. No, that in case there are no deliveries, complete lockdown. Just for example, complete lockdown, then at least you have something to eat within your home. You get something to survive, and then of course water. No, we cannot always rely on municipal water. So there is rainwater. If we have a way to capture rainwater, then in a way we have everything within our house, within our structure to be able to survive. No? So I think all of these things, creating a healthy person by delivering to him a healthy home, which is part of green architecture, this is going to be the architect's contribution towards helping out people defend themselves against COVID. Of course, there's the sanitation issue. So now, actually, I'm doing some houses already, which when you enter, There's already a portion where you leave your shoes, and then right away there's a bathroom already, so you can wash up, etc. And there's a ledge which you can leave all the stuff which you bring out bring from the outside into your house, leave it there, etc. So there, no, these are all minor tweaks, but again, ultimately they still point towards trying to create a healthier home, which is actually the essence of one of the essences of coming out with a green building or a green home.
Right. So thanks for that. It means that actually innately to green buildings is actually the human person. Now at the center of it all is you want a healthy person, not just you're doing it for the sake of the environment for its sake, no, but actually for the people who will live in these homes. So that's something new. Parang before this our talk, I was thinking about green architecture should really just be about being attuned to the environment. But actually for whom, right? It's for the people who live in these homes. So
Oh,
so I guess the short answer, yes, sir.
it's a good thing you mentioned that. You know the three pillars of sustainability, which was brought by the Brundtland Report of the UN:
Mm-hmm.
people, planet, and profit.
Profit.
And,
Yeah.
and they say that they are three equal.
Mm-hmm.
Through the years, I realized that is wrong. The main reason why we're pursuing sustainability is for people. What does it matter
Right.
if the world continues and human race dies? Right? So actually, when you think about it, I thought it's people is the more important thing. The only reason why we're going to sustainability. Of course, the people rely on the environment, right? So we take care of the environment as a means to support sustainability of people. Of course, that's why we cannot kill the environment either, because that's where we have to get our resources, diba? So there are many things like that which I, after many years of advocacy, I hear what the UN says, and then I start thinking about it, and then there's something wrong here, you know. I think so. That's one of the things which I've learned over the years. No? We are pursuing sustainability for people.
Right. That's a good way to put it, that we are pursuing sustainability for our people. And in that sense also, ano sir, mas nagiging personal siya for the person, right? Na I'm gonna do something about it because my life is at stake. I'm gonna
Exactly.
go green. I'm gonna adopt green building practices because my life and my community is at stake, right? And I'm gonna take care of the environment because it's what I depend on, right? So I think that's a really good way to summarize why green architecture is actually something very practical, something that can be adopted by everyone. So to wrap up our session, sir, we just have a question for you. So if you would give top 3 tips for homeowners to practice sustainability in their home, so what would these 3 tips be?
Okay. Let's say first is comfort, because that's the ultimate, and that's the in thing now, because we want to keep healthy. Second is energy. Third is water. Now let's go to comfort. So how to make yourself comfortable? First of all, since the Philippines is hot, reduce heat. So for example, you go to your house, no, you look at, are there windows? First of all, find out first where's the east, west, north, south, because I think some Filipinos don't know where this, no? So where's the west in my house? Oh, there. Okay, so is the sun coming in there? Maybe you can put louvers. Maybe you can plant bamboo in front of that window, so you reduce the heat, no? So things like that. The roof is always very hot. In the Filipino bahay kubo, there's always a singawan on top on the roof, because hot
Mm-hmm.
air rises. Eh. So look at your roof. Is there a way for the hot air in my roof to get out? Or if not, look for a way to insulate your roof. Have natural light so that at least you can connect with the outdoors. Have crest ventilation. Make sure your windows open so you. By the way, sa Philippines, where does the wind come from? Northeast and southwest. Amihan and Habagat. Again, get a compass, look at your house. Okay, do I have windows on the northeast? Do I have windows on the southwest? And make sure that you have that so there's cross ventilation in your house. No? So that's comfort. Live a comfortable life by creating those small little details in your house. Second, energy. Kuryente. Okay, if you can, switch to LED lights. At the moment, they're the ones which reduce a lot of electricity usage. No? Now, after hearing this, don't say, okay, I'll remove all the bulbs in my house and change it to LED. Teka muna, dahan-dahan lang. First, determine what lights are on the whole day or the whole night. That's the first candidate for changing to LED lights, because then that will save you a lot of money. Then little by little, go through that. No, if you're going to buy appliances, there's these yellow tags in all appliances when you buy refrigerators, air cons, etc. It's called the EER, Energy Efficiency Ratio. So if you're choosing between several models, try to choose the model which has the highest number of EER. This yellow little tag you can see, no? At least that's one way of saving energy because then that will save electricity. And finally, water. Harvest rainwater. Water is a free resource. Sometimes I tell people, with the Philippines, we're surrounded by water. It rains so much, it floods so much, and we have to get bottled water. Parang kulang tayo sa tubig. So I was telling them, we have so much rain. So can you just harvest a little bit of rainwater? How do you do that in your house? Hanapin mo yung downspout, the things which come from the gutter.
Mm.
Make a bed, buy some drums, put it there. That's the simplest way. And then from there, you can make dilig, you can wash your car. Matter of fact, in an emergency, you can actually use that to take a bath, di ba? I mean, at least there's water in your house, di ba? And that is a free resource. So I would like to say those are the three simple things for an existing house, no? Look at your comfort, the heat, cross ventilation. Look at energy, the lights, and then of course the energy efficiency ratio. And then finally for water, just do a simple thing of harvest the rainwater. It's a free resource.
Okay, thank you so much for those tips. So to our audience, and meron na tayong practical tips on how to make sure na we can try to start going green in terms of our practices at home. Totoo yung water, no? We have so much rain that needs to be harvested. So we just have a question from our audience na sent to us previously. To be green is expensive, di ba? And I think the Philippines, for you, we have the local rating systems as well. How different is this from the typical LEED certifications and green building systems abroad?
Okay, so those are two questions. One is that green is expensive. Well, I think there is a more simpler way. Just do the passive approaches to green
Mm-hmm.
orientation, etc., harvesting water. Now there are two local rating systems by Philippine Green Building Council. Is the Verde rating system. There are 11 categories. Then we have Green, GREEEN, by the Philippine Green Building Initiative, which has 8 categories. All of the building rating systems all over the world are similar. They will talk about energy, they'll talk about water, they'll talk about indoor environmental quality. They just break it down in different ways. No? But essentially, at the end of the day, they are all similar. They're all the same. And they have different ratings. Like, for example, in the US, LEED, I think the energy component there is something like 30% of 100%. And in
Mm-hmm.
Singapore, Green Mark, the energy component there was 50%. Why? Example, in Singapore, it's a hot country. They'll be running their air cons a lot. So therefore, they watch that the energy component. In the US, hindi naman masyado, di ba? So those are the differences, no? Just and there's a new one which is it's called EDGE, EDGE. It's by the International Finance Corporation. It's also in the Philippines now. That one is very simple. It only has 3 components. Uh, energy, water, materials.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it just depends on the criteria, pero generally they have the same categories, different
Yes,
weights, and different applicability to the countries. Right.
yes. Because
Okay.
green across the world is the same. Diba? We have to be sustainable. We have to save resources. Pareho lang yan eh. Ano lang, it's how
Right.
they hack it up and how they cut it up together, diba?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So any other questions from our audience? If you still have questions, you may still drop them down here. But if not, I think that's a wrap. Thank you so much, Architect Mike, for sharing with us practical sustainability tips on green architecture. So
Can
that's
I
all
can
the
I
time we have for tonight.
can I
Yes,
add
Architect
a
Mike,
conclusion? No,
of course.
just one more idea. Green buildings is not one big solution. Green buildings is many small solutions to come up with a green building. So to do baby steps, no, and I think I suggest that we do baby steps one household at a time. Okay, so when you guys go home, look at your house, look at the tips I shared with you, and start today. No, start today. Try to see baby steps towards sustainability.
Thank you so much. So baby steps towards sustainability, one household at a time. So I guess that's it. Thank you so much, Architect Mike. So how
Thank you
can
also.
they learn? How can our audience learn more from you? So Architect Mike maintains a Facebook page. the Green Architects. So for more tips, please follow his Facebook page. So the link is right there on your screens. And then at the same time, actually, I met Architect Mike through the Community for Sustainability Practitioners in the Philippines, who share the vision of elevating the practice of sustainability in the country. If you are a sustainability practitioner and you would like to be part of our community, you may join us by answering the registration form. So with that, thank you so much again, Architect Mike, and to our audience. Thank you for tuning in to Sustainable PH, your online channel for anything sustainability. Follow us on our social media platforms. Again, this is Mai. See you next week, this time with Marks. Our next guest will be Migo Bautista, Partnership Manager of the Biodiversity Program at RAFI, or the Ramon Aboy Peace Foundation Incorporated. So with that, thank you so much and see you next week.
Thank you.
I hope for a sustainable Philippines to get to the point where we ensure ecological integrity, clean and healthy environment, where we expand economic opportunities in agriculture, fishery and forestry, and when we ensure a people-centered, clean and efficient governance. I think this is how I envision sustainable Philippines.
Hello, I am Macario SD1, an undergraduate student of De La Salle University, Manila. And I envision a sustainable Philippines where every Filipino is responsible enough to take a stand and to take action on the current state and the future fate of our country, particularly the environment and its people. I envision a sustainable Philippines where every Filipino is walking on the same path and working on the same goal, to nourish the environment and make this world a better place, not just for our own generation, but more especially for the generations to come.
A nation that is willing to work with nature to create a brighter future.
A sustainable Philippines is when every Filipino works for the good of the country, economically, socially, and environmentally, making it a better place to live in forever.
A sustainable Philippines will mean self-sufficiency in food, clean energy, and clean potable water everywhere. Plastic production, usage, and disposal will be better handled. Pollution will be at levels that do not adversely affect the health of people, animals, and plants. Lastly, the government will truly be focused on the needs of the people in all respects so that there is less waste in fuel, time, and health.
I would like to see Sustainable PH catalyze a movement of responsible stewards who conserve and preserve the rich natural resources of the Philippines so that every Filipino can have access to basic human needs of food, clothing, and shelter, so that every Filipino can have an equal opportunity to thrive and flourish in his own country, because we are Sustainable PH.
My future vision for a sustainable Philippines is that we can create loads of new jobs and a great economy from healing the planet, and the opportunity for our children to breathe clean air, have clean and fresh water, and harmony with nature.
I hope for a sustainable Philippines where everyone can have access to basic services like quality education and healthcare, and also enjoy clean air and environment, live in sustainable cities, and have decent jobs, and be protected by justice.